All right, we're 3 minutes past. I think this is a good time to start things, Alex.
Yeah, absolutely. So once again, welcome everyone. So I'd just like to extend a warm welcome to everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're really excited today to be talking about extending service and asset management to business teams. This is part of a new series of webinars that we're doing here at ServiceRocket. And Johnny and I are thrilled to be part of this, and we're ready to dive in and have a lot of fun. So why don't we start with some brief introductions, right? So again, for those listening in, please say hello in the chat, in the Q&A section. Tell us where you're coming from, what you're excited about. And in the meantime, my name is Alex, Alex Ho, Solution Architect at ServiceRocket. I'm based in lovely Sydney, and my role is about designing solutions for our customers using the Atlassian tools, making sure that they're not only practical and scalable, but fit for purpose. So that's kind of my role. Johnny, what about yourself?
Yeah, I have a similar role to Alex, also working as a solution architect to help our customers solve their business challenges using Atlassian products. And just like Alex, I'm also based in Sydney.
Fantastic. You know, Johnny, I did a little homework before today, but without giving away, how old we are. Did you know that we actually have a combined history of 38 years at ServiceRocket? Time really flies, doesn't it?
Guess that makes us fairly old, but I should say fairly experienced. I think that sounds better.
I like to think that we're just getting warmed up, Johnny, just like this webinar. So just a little bit about ServiceRocket for our audience today. We're a leading provider of tech-enabled services, right? And we've been around for over 20 years, doing what we do best. But I guess the most important thing for us is that we've got your back, right? So in everything that we kind of do, that's kind of our model. And ServiceRocket is proud to be an Atlassian Platinum Solution Partner. We have expertise in cloud and ITSM, and we help in a variety of ways. So from advisory and implementation to training and support. For those of you in the audience, we're just going to pop a little link into the chat, into the Q&A section, so that we have that if you need to get in touch with us at any time. So Johnny, if you can help pop that into the chat for our audience, that will be great.
All right, just give me a sec.
Okay. While you're doing that, let's begin with our agenda, shall we? So firstly, it's just some quick housekeeping. If anyone has any questions during the presentation today, we would love for you to kind of bring those to us. Feel free to put them into the Q&A section, and we'll be happy to address those at the end of the presentation. Depending on how many we get, if we don't get through all of them, we'll be sure to go through them and make sure we get back to you as well, right? So, okay. I know that we've got 3 key areas that we're going to focus on today. Johnny, let me know if I've got these kind of in the right order, right? So firstly, we're going to be looking at how Jira Service Management can be tailored to enable service requests for business teams, right? So secondly, how automations can help enforce those business processes to minimize human error. I think that's quite an interesting topic there. And then thirdly, how you can simplify tracking and management of your business assets that are tied to those processes. And again, that's quite an interesting topic there.
That's spot on, Alex.
Okay, so with that in mind, Johnny, let's set the scene here, right? We know that today's pace of business means that organizations are moving faster than ever. There's more and more being demanded of us. So I'm hearing a lot about IT teams transforming in the way they deliver services and focus on their customers. But today, we're talking about business teams, right? And they too are evolving. Isn't that right, Johnny?
Just so that it's clear, Alex, let's clarify what we mean by business teams. So these are teams in any organization that are not your typical IT support teams, which people often associate with Jira Service Management. So for example, a HR team or a finance team in an organization, or the legal team in an organization that has to negotiate and review contracts. A lot of these teams now work in the same way that a typical IT service team would work. So they get lots of requests for certain types of work they need to do, and they have to triage and respond to those requests.
I think you've explained that quite well, Johnny. So now that we understand what business teams are, what have you seen as to some of the more common challenges with these teams, particularly, I guess, as they operate more and more like service teams that you've just mentioned?
So imagine tracking the work you have to do, Alex, from multiple sources. That's one of the main challenges. Let's use an example. Think of a legal team in a large corporation. As a member of this team, you might be asked by many people from other departments to review contracts. Now, if you're working in the office, they might just walk up to your desk and put the contract in front of you and say, hey, can you review this for me? Now, you might laugh about that, but it does happen. And some people might do that, and others might send you an email or a chat message or call you over the phone.
Yeah, I can definitely imagine that. And I've seen this problem firsthand too. It still really baffles me how people deal with requests from so many different channels, right? You get really swamped. So, Johnny, you mentioned reviewing contracts. I suppose that's just one type of request, right? That's not all that the legal team does. Imagining multiplying that to like 20 other types of requests.
I know, Alex, it becomes hard to keep track of everything. So you might as well create a spreadsheet for yourself, but that's just for one person. Now, there might be 10 people in the team, all of whom have their own tasks to handle. And if everyone uses their own spreadsheet, then there's no single source of truth. Even if you combine everything into one common spreadsheet, you still have the problem with a lack of visibility on what's happening and the progress of each individual task. So lots of these types of work will involve back and forth communication to get more information and context. And you can't really capture that on a spreadsheet.
Yeah, exactly. Overuse of spreadsheets, like I can certainly relate to that one. I think it will be helpful if you can perhaps, Johnny, point out some real use cases that you've seen our audience can really resonate with, because I think there's so many out there.
Yeah, so I mentioned the legal team examples, like getting requests to review contracts. And if we look at, say, HR, they might get requests to onboard a new employee or offboard someone who is leaving. They might also get a lot of general questions regarding policies on taking leave or policies on working from home or moving to another city, for example. Then you have marketing teams, and they might get requests to create a marketing brochure and run a campaign, or to run a campaign for a particular product or service that another team is trying to sell.
Right, okay. They're great examples. Now that you've helped us set the scene here, Johnny, I think what you're saying is that business teams often have a lot of work to do, right? And these challenges we spoke about aren't exactly helping them to get things done swiftly and effectively, which is a pain, right? So this, I guess, leads us into JSM, which I know can be customized to address these pain points. So with the knowledge that you have on this, Johnny, like what have you got for us around JSM?
Well, before we go to customization, Alex, I would say try and start with the default project templates that JSM provides out of the box.
Did I hear you say templates? That's music to my ears. I remember having to set everything up from scratch when I used to build my JSM projects. That probably says something about my age, but we won't go there. So Johnny, what kind of templates are we talking about here?
We have templates for HR, for marketing, legal, and many more that you can use to set up your service management project with just a few clicks. And these templates will set up the request types and workflows that you need for common requests. And you might find that this will implement a good deal of your requirements.
Right. Very nice. I love what Atlassian has done with those templates. And from what I've seen, they keep improving, which is awesome. I have to ask Johnny, what can you do though if you don't see a template, even though there's so many there, if you don't see one that quite aligns to what your team does?
Well, if you don't see a template you need, Jira Service Management is highly flexible, enabling you to configure your own service project the way you need. And it will be similar to what you used to do, Alex, but probably a lot easier these days. You can always start from a template, even though it doesn't match exactly, and then tweak the project to your specific needs. So you add in the request types, customize their fields and workflows. Maybe you implement an approval process as well.
I'm glad it's so much easier. That sounds great. Just thinking here, are there any practical points perhaps you can share with us how, because we're talking about templates here, like how can we set up these service projects?
Yeah, so let's start with one of the main bottlenecks that people experience in any type of work that is a request, and that is the constant back and forth communication that's required to get more information. So Alex, I'll ask you a question. Have you ever received an email from a customer or colleague asking you to do something, but it's not quite clear what they want? So you have to go back to them for clarification.
Oh, all the time, Johnny. Request comes through so many channels, and like for emails, for chat, for systems. So you're right. Most of the time, it actually doesn't have all the information that I need, right? So this, I think, is also so common across teams and organizations. It's such a big challenge.
Yeah, and just because you implement Jira Service Management and get everybody to submit a request for the work, it doesn't mean that this problem goes away. If your request form is too generic, you'll find yourself in back and forth communication still, asking for more data or clarification on what needs to be done. And so the first point to consider is making sure you have enough fields on your request forms to capture the inputs you will need from the customer. Ideally, when the ticket is submitted, you should have all the information you need to work on it.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I think it's a good first practical tip as well.
Yeah, so make sure each field is clear as to what's required, and pay attention to the fact that Jira has a lot of system fields that are quite generic in name.
I know what you mean. Like, so fields like summary and description, I suppose, and those kind of fields, right?
Correct. So if I'm creating a request for, let's say, employee onboarding, and you can see this example on the slide that I'm sharing here. If I'm creating an employee onboarding request and I see the field summary, it's not exactly clear what I should be putting there. Luckily, in Jira Service projects, when we configure the request form, we can change the name of the field so that it appears more user-friendly. In this example, the summary field appears as employee name. So now I know to enter the employee's name in that field.
Okay, I can certainly see how this can reduce a lot of back and forth, right? Just to clarify the information we need. So this is great.
Not only that, Alex, it should also reduce the amount of time it takes to resolve the request, because now you're not going back and forth and waiting for information.
That sounds like an efficiency gain right there. I like that. So while we're on the efficiency train, I'm wondering, do you have any other tips you can suggest that can really help make the team more kind of efficient, right? So we've seen that like there's so many things that they need to do. Yeah, what have you got?
Well, let's consider this point. Sometimes the best way to handle a request is to not have to handle one at all.
Wait, hold on. That sounds a little cryptic. Care to elaborate? What do you mean by that?
So if a lot of requests are just general questions, like I mentioned earlier, the HR team having to answer questions about employees regarding leave policies and working from home. If you know you're going to field a lot of those same questions over and over, it's better to implement a knowledge base that you can direct people to.
Right. Got it. That makes sense.
And with JSM, as a user is typing in their requests or question, suggested articles will appear, like what you see on this screen here. And that will hopefully answer their question, and that will save your team from having an extra ticket to respond to.
Okay. So from what I've heard, just to sum it up, there's two things, right? You spoke about the first thing is we should be very careful to consider the information to capture upfront in the request forms, which will help reduce, I guess, unnecessary back and forth communications. And then secondly, the use of a knowledge base can add great value to, what do we call it, like a self-service function, right, in the service desk. So those are really handy practical tips, I think. Just going to pause for a moment here and just give another reminder to our audience that, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A section, right? And yeah, we'll tackle those a little bit later towards the end of the presentation today. So feel free to do that at any time. Okay. So the next topic we're going to explore is around automations. It's one of my favorite topics. As business teams starts delivering services to their customers using JSM, I know that with automations, it can help replace some of those manual and repetitive tasks in their processes. I've seen that before. Johnny, why don't you tell us more around what automations can do in JSM? Because I know you've got a ton of knowledge there.
Yeah, so as you said, they're great for reducing the amount of repetitive tasks you have to do. And they also help enforce workflow processes and reduce the likelihood of human error. So an example of this would be someone not updating the status on an issue or ticket. There's no point in implementing a workflow that perfectly reflects your process and gives you an accurate picture of where that work is at if no one bothers to properly update the ticket statuses, or they keep forgetting to.
That makes good sense. Yeah, I suppose there are many examples where human error can really impact the process, isn't there? One that I can think of is where, and I think this happens so often, that people leaving important information out at a particular stage of a process.
That's right, Alex. And another one is where users forget to notify someone or to follow up on an action. This is where automation can help.
Do you think you can give us some examples?
Yep. So the email channel is a great example of where automation can help. So Alex, in your experience, do you feel that organizations still heavily use emails and perhaps struggle to drive people towards your support portal for raising requests?
That's a good question. Let me see. Many of the organizations I work with, they do use a corporate email to handle support requests, right? So whether it's external or internal customers, everything comes through that channel. So I guess for many organizations, like getting rid of that is simply not an option, right? So if that's the case, what do we do here?
Emails can still be part of your solution, but JSM can make life easier. Just imagine for a minute, emails come in, request tickets are created, and the initial response is fired off. And the ticket is also assigned. So JSM can do all this for you via automations, and you don't have to lift the finger.
I suppose in the automated response to the requester, we can also point to the ticket, can't we? And raise awareness and encourage them to use kind of the portal in the future. I think that would be nice. That's something that's available, within the scope of automations.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think that's nice, how about another one? How about automatically transitioning a workflow status based on certain conditions? Say you request for more information from a customer. So the ticket is transitioned to a status called waiting for customer. And when you get a response from that person, you don't want to keep the ticket in the same status. So an automation is handy for this, to transition the ticket into another status, such as in progress, for example. If you leave that to manual work, the agent who's working on the ticket may forget about that transition. And then you end up with a whole bunch of tickets that say waiting for customer when in fact you've already gotten a response.
Mhm. I know that most people have forgotten to update the status of a ticket at some point. I include it. So this would definitely come in handy. I would imagine there's more automations like we can use to reduce repetitive tasks like this.
Yeah,
Is that
so
right?
yeah, I like, so some types of requests can generate additional work, and that has to be assigned to other teams. And you can track this by creating additional issues in Jira and linking them to the request ticket. But instead of doing that manually, why not just automate it? Because that's repetitive work. You don't want to have to do that all the time.
Yeah, I like the examples you gave, Johnny. I think they did well to really highlight the possibilities you can achieve with automations in JSM. I know there's probably other things that we've yet to talk about as well. I suppose you can do so much with automations that uh, it's probably a big enough topic we can run an entirely separate webinar for, right? Um, okay, I'm just going to pause for another moment and give another reminder for our audience that if anyone has any questions, particularly around the automations that we've just spoke about, here's your chance to pop them into the Q&A section, right? So feel free to do that. So moving on to the next part, I'm really excited that, with this last part of our conversation, Johnny, because I know that you've got a demo you want to show us, right? So by now, let's say business teams are happy using JSM. They have enabled those smart automations that you've spoken about, Johnny, to handle repetitive tasks, to reduce human error. But I think there's still one problem, right? Which is spreadsheets. Business teams could still be using like tracking and managing information in those spreadsheets, right?
Yeah, so they might still be doing that in spreadsheets, but it's quite easy to move those into Jira Service Management. And in JSM, we have asset management. And this isn't just for your typical IT assets, like your laptops and devices. Assets are really anything of value to a business. So, for example, any intellectual property a company creates, the offices or buildings that they own or lease, any company cars they might own, and most importantly, employees.
Yeah, this is interesting because I think many organizations don't really categorize employees under that as assets. And also, I know that employee information is usually held in a corporate user directory somewhere, right? So let's say we can tap into that information. What benefit are there to track employee information, for asset management?
So I think that tracking them and their relationship with other employees and what department they work in, their reporting structure can greatly benefit your service management operation.
Okay, I'm just gonna stop you there for a sec. I think this is an important point. Like, do you mind elaborating a little bit further? I think particularly, like, what would it actually look like in the JSM tool?
Yeah, let me show you that instead of going through these slides here. I think it's time to get into a demo. So what I'm going to do
Fantastic.
is bring up my help desk. This is the portal, and I have a number of portals for marketing and HR and legal. So these are your business teams.
Okay.
And I'm logged in as a person called Sarah, and Sarah is a sales person who needs to raise a request for the marketing team to get her some assets. So we go to the marketing desk and we're going to request a marketing asset. Now, Sarah's going to request for some t-shirts for a training workshop that she is running. So I'll just fill in these fields here. And so we need 5 shirts and the asset type is just t-shirts. By the way, this form here, almost everything is out of the box with one of the JSM project templates. The only thing I added was a couple of option values in this what kind of marketing asset field. And what project or event is this for? I'll just say training workshop. And let's set a due date of this Friday. And so we'll send this request. So Sarah has raised that request, and now I'm going to switch over to the agent view. So this is someone working in the marketing team. They see the requests come through into their queue, and here it is. Need a company promotional t-shirt. And now the agent has to follow a process. And the first thing that they want to do is make sure that there is budget approval. And so we have a workflow, which I customized. This workflow here is to request the budget approval. And when that happens, we now have to wait for someone to approve of Sarah's request. And this person is set on a field called manager. And you can see here, the manager has been automatically selected. I didn't have to go and choose who that person is. The automation that I have running automatically selects this following certain rules.
That's very nice. Okay, so you've shown us the request, the employee request field, where someone can raise that ticket, that request. And then just now we've also seen the agent view, right, for that ticket, and how, you know, agents kind of work with the tickets, including that approval bit. So diving a little bit deeper, do you think you can show us how it works behind the scenes, Johnny? I think our audience might be interested to kind of see the mechanics of how it works.
Yeah, so let's go into the assets feature of Jira Service Management. So in here, what I've done is I've set up a employees object schema. And this has three main parts to it. There's employees, department, and role, but we'll just focus on employees here. And you can see that each employee has a object in this. So there's one for Sarah, and there's one for Evelyn, who is her manager. And when we look at Sarah's employee object, you can see that one of the fields is manager name, and that points to Evelyn. And so what the automation has done is it has looked up the reporter of that ticket, which is Sarah. It finds Sarah's employee object in the asset schema, and then works out who her manager is, which is Evelyn. And from there, it grabs Evelyn's account and sets that as sets it on the manager field that we saw previously. So automatically selecting a manager by looking up the asset information.
Wow, this really makes life easier, doesn't it? The way I understand this from what you just said is that we no longer have to work out who the manager is, because I think in large organizations that could be quite problematic, right? There's so many people. And we no longer also have to manually add the manager into the ticket as an approver, which I think, you know, is very often what people do.
Yeah, exactly. And this eliminates that potential place where mistakes can be made, because if you have to manually add someone, you can always select the wrong person, for example.
Yeah. So given what we've just saw, I can sense kind of a question from the audience. It's actually a question from my part too, where what about the effort to get everything set up? How easy it is to get things set up is what you've shown us.
So most of what you saw with the assets, that was just from the people template when creating a new asset schema. And I'll show you this. So when we go to assets, create schema, you can see that there's some built-in templates, and I just use that people template option to set it up for me. And I added one extra attribute, which was the user one. And so that we could associate an employee object with a user account. But that was it. That was pretty straightforward, no coding involved at all. The automation is a little bit more complex, but what I have here is, so on this, I'll just stop this presentation. This is actually a Miro board, and what I have is a little diagram to explain the process. So when we create the ticket and request for budget approval, that triggers the automation to find the manager to get the approval from. And this section down here has a more detailed breakdown for those that are interested in going into and looking at how the automation actually works. So I'll share this board with everybody on the session so you can have access to it afterwards and look around if you want to.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks for diving into that. there's quite a lot of information there to digest. I guess if anyone has any questions, please use the Q&A section and add your questions. I'm just going to do a quick time check. So we're doing pretty well. We are close to our time together today. But before wrapping up, I'd like to thank you, Johnny, for your time today. I think for sharing your expertise with us about extending to business teams for service and asset management. I think just from that little bit of time, you've shown us quite a lot of things that can really help.
No worries. Thanks, Alex. And thanks everyone for joining and listening in. I think there's a few more things we want to talk about before we conclude, right?
Yeah, that's right. So as I mentioned earlier, like this is part of a new series of webinar that we're doing at ServiceRocket. So please do keep an eye out for more of these, and please do come back. I think we're going to open up for questions now. So we're going to take a look at the questions we have. So there's still a chance if anyone has questions, pop them into the Q&A where we'll get them addressed. So we might try and answer a couple of those depending on how many we get. Johnny, do you want to take a look there for us?
I don't see any at the moment. We'll give people a minute or so to put their questions in. But in the meantime, what I'll do is I'll just share the link to this board that I've been presenting from. And so feel free to jump in and look around. You can have access to it afterwards.
Yeah, fantastic. So for those of us who are keen to dive deeper, I guess like you can always email us or take some of the training classes that we offer on JSM. We'd love to help you there. We also have a subscription program, which is a great way to kind of get the training you need throughout the whole year when you need it, right? So when your teams kind of need that training. So yeah, that kind of wraps up our time together today. Once again, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. So if any questions do pop up, we'll endeavor to kind of get back to you. So thank you.
Thanks, guys. And yeah, I think we can stick around for a few more minutes in case there's still any last minute questions.
But yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. That sounds great.
If not, thanks, guys, for attending.
Could be, Johnny, that the presentation was quite simple and clear, right? You did a good job, so we don't have a lot of questions there.
Hopefully it was clear, and yeah.
But it may be that there's quite a lot of content as well, and people might need just to take some time to digest it. So if things do come up, there's that email that I think you popped into the chat, isn't it? So they can kind of send those questions through later on.
Yeah, there's the contact link.
Yep. Okay, it doesn't look like there's anything coming through, so we'll wrap up there. Once again, thank you everyone for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.